Today's guest on the Winning Teams podcast is Jackie Ferguson, who is the Director of Multicultural Programming in Walk West in North Carolina. A bit about Jackie's background. She has had a very successful career in sales and marketing in many large corporations where she managed multi-million-dollar accounts. And more recently, she has become an expert in the whole area of diversity and is now a certified diversity expert. And she will talk to us today about that subject. But why should this be of interest to any of you? Well, we're certainly saying that diversity should be a lot more than just ticking a box, something that you have done. It is a real business imperative for anybody who is responsible for bottom line results, CEOs, senior directors, and you are measured on those bottom line results, then you should be paying attention to diversity, because Jackie will demonstrate during the course of the interview how this really impacts bottom line. It's not a nice to have, it's not a should to have, it's actually a business imperative. And if you're looking to, recruit, retain, and develop staff going forward and not to have high turnover, then you really need to understand the whole area of diversity way beyond kind of the initial area of gender and race, that goes a lot deeper, and how you're actually going to implement that change throughout your organization. So this is a really fascinating subject, and one that we will come back to again with Jackie, I have no doubt, in the very near future. If you want to get more leadership tips, if you want to download my book, which is based on work I've done with Fortune 500 leaders, the 10 key traits of top business leaders, then go to my website, www.johnmurphyinternational.com, and there's loads of goodies there. But in the meantime, sit back and enjoy this really, really interesting topic from a diversity expert, Jackie. So, Jackie, thank you so much indeed for coming along here today. It's a great pleasure to have you with us on the Winning Teams podcast.
Thank you, John, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Not at all. Just before we get into the kind of the detail of it, what is it about this topic of diversity that, I know it's a passion of yours from conversations we've had at previous times, but what was the germ of that? What was that kind of event or a series of events or background that's caused you to have such a passion?
Yes, John. So I grew up in a multiracial, multi-generational home. So diversity has always been a part of my culture and my upbringing and background. And throughout my adulthood, I've been able to volunteer and donate to programs that benefited people who were in underserved communities and marginalized communities. And working at Walk West, I had an opportunity to participate in some of the diversity programs that we have here, and then lead the course build of a diversity and inclusion course, which is an online course that we're building currently at Walk West.
Okay, and I want to come back and talk about that a bit later, but just to kind of get into the topic of diversity, and I said you and I have had some great conversations about this, but when at kind of a surface level, when we talk about diversity, it tends to be about gender and race.
That's exactly.
And I know it is about that as well, but it's a lot more than that, isn't it? You might just explain when we're talking about it, what else it is.
Absolutely. So there are many types of diversity that you would think about. There's generational diversity, there's neurodiversity, there's diversity in experience, there's the differently abled, there's cultural diversity. So diversity is not just about race and gender. There are so many different types of diversity. You can find diversity in any culture, in any group. And so it's important to recognize that when you're looking at diversity, it's not just the diversity that you necessarily see. There's a lot of diversity that is not physically evident.
And I mean, we know that, because we will all say that diversity, is important.
Yes.
And to a certain level, and it's a bit like motherhood and apple pie. Somebody say, well, do you agree with diversity? You're not going to say no, right? Um,
Okay.
but so there is that element of, yes, we buy into it, but it's a token, yes, and so we can tick a box. What do you need to do to get it on the radar of the CEOs and the senior leaders in an organization that it's more than, oh, we must do something about diversity? Can we get our HR people to do something and then we'll tick a box and it's done? How do we
That's
make it become center of the focus?
So one of the things that you have to do, John, is think about what's in it for me. I mean, that's just the question that people in C-suite want to know the answer to. And the answer to that is that there are so many benefits to your organization. So there is the compliance piece and there is the social good piece. But really, you can get so many benefits from understanding and implementing a diversity and inclusion practice that leads to higher revenue, better culture overall, where your employees are thriving, there's more creativity, better innovation, your recruiting and retention practices are better. The people that you're able to recruit are better employees overall. 67% of people looking for work are looking for companies that are diverse and have diversity practices. And that is going up. That study was done a few years ago, and millennials even want more diversity because their friends are diverse. And so they want the understanding that their thoughts and opinions and ideas are going to be shared and important and taken seriously. And it's not, just information from the top, but they'll feel comfortable and be able to thrive in that environment.
Okay, so if I was playing devil's advocate on that, and I am the cynical CEO, I'd say, yeah, okay, Jackie, I get that, and that's great, and what people are looking for in engagement. But I'm going to be in front of my board next week, and I'm going to be measured on the bottom line results. So
Mm-hmm.
how can you translate what you're talking about to improving my bottom line results? Because I will pay a lot of lip service, but if you really want to engage me and motivate me to take action, I've got to connect it to that bottom line. So how do you answer that cynical CEO that I've just been playing?
That's a great question. So diverse companies on average produce 19% more revenue than companies that are not diverse.
And do you know why?
Yes, because of the fact that employees are more productive, because they feel like they're able to be themselves. There's also an increase in the ability to just have these different ideas and different opinions come through with regard to innovation and then creativity. It's very important for problem solving. And those are some of the reasons that it's important to have diversity and benefits your bottom line.
Okay. And when you're looking at that, I mean, what you're talking about there, and I get that, and that makes a huge amount of sense.
Yeah.
The challenge for the organization is to take them from where they are to where you want them to be in terms of really embracing, engaging, and being and participating in this approach is quite a significant shift, both in terms of mindset and how they go about doing things. And we can all think, I mean, I work in lots of different organizations, and I can think of some organizations that I work with where change is really tough because it's been around for a long time. It probably has been very successful for a long time. And the kind of burning platform for change isn't really, the heat is not felt that great. So how do you go about getting that change implemented?
So, John, you have to think about how society is changing overall. So society overall is becoming more diverse. We're working more globally. And so you have to be able to understand, market to employ a diverse population. And the reason why you need to do that is because you need to understand how the market is changing. The people that you're selling to is changing. And what you'll need to understand with that is as society changes and as your employee base changes, you'll need to have a better understanding of what they're looking for, trends in the market. And that prevents an innovation lag if you have diversity in your business. Innovation lag is one of the things that creates an issue with sustainability of a business. And so if you think about businesses like Blockbuster or Kodak or Borders Bookstore, they had an innovation lag. And you have to understand how people are, how they shop, how they buy, how they think, what their habits are. And you do that by having a diverse group around you that is representative of society.
And one of the things, and again, it's something that I come across not necessarily when we're talking about diversity, but it's very relevant when you're talking about diversity, is that you have that generation that you're hiring into the organization, which, as you said, they're diverse in so many ways. But you bring them into the organization, but then they're being managed by people who don't necessarily come from that generation or don't come from an understanding of how to manage those people, which is very different. How do you overcome that? Because I certainly see in my work, where senior teams are having to adjust their way of working and helping them find a new way of working in order to optimize the potential of the people that they've hired. How do you go about helping those leaders to change?
So when they understand the value of having diversity and inclusion as part of their program and part of their culture, it becomes easier to have that conversation. I think the most important thing is for people to feel comfortable talking to as a diversity leader or having people either in their organization or mentors where they can have those difficult conversations and unpack those complicated questions and conversations so that they can feel comfortable asking those questions, getting those answers, and knowing how to interact. It's different and it's change, and it takes time, but I think that it's a journey and the process of it is what's important. You don't do the checkbox thing where you do a quick training or you get to your end result very quickly. It's an ongoing process.
Yeah, I think because I know certainly I don't, in my own world, I don't do one-off events because I find that, somebody can say, okay, you do an event for a day and people say, that's brilliant, that's fantastic. I say, hang on a second, we haven't done anything yet. Yeah. Tell me in 3 months whether it was great. And that's why all of the work that I do is that we come back, we check in, we review, we understand what's worked, what hasn't worked, and then what are we going to do for the next period of time. So that embedding of change does take time. And, I know that, when you're talking to organizations, you come in, you do the work with them. How do you make sure that it keeps kind of very central to what they're focusing on, and it isn't just something that they've done and they move on to the next project? How do you actually embed it into the organization that it just becomes part of what they do?
Yeah, so diversity has to be part of the DNA of an organization. And that means that it needs to be in their strategic plan. It needs to be part of their organizational goals. It needs to be part of performance evaluations to understand, are your employees thriving? Are they able to contribute? So it needs to be really woven into the entire organization, the goals of the organization in order to be successful.
Mm. And when you're looking at the whole part, if you look at that, what just reminds me when you were talking about it, that, it's, when we talk about organizations creating their own values, and diversity, I'm not saying it has to be named as one of their values, but they've got to live that, haven't they, as a value?
That's exactly right. And John, diversity actually, or inclusion, should be named as a value. It's very important to call it out. And I'm finding that people who are candidates for jobs are looking for that. That's something that's very important to this generation of workers, just to understand that there is diversity and inclusion, not just for who you are at the moment, but as you age and as your physical health may change. It's important that people feel comfortable, that they know that they'll be accepted and accommodated and that they'll be able to thrive.
One of the things that I think, and we did talk about in the previous conversation, one of the things that I think is really interesting when you're talking about diversity, and as I said, you've kind of opened the onion a little bit on this, but it comes back to behavior as well, yeah, doesn't it? I mean, there is diversity in behavior and what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Can you maybe elaborate on that? Because I think that's a very interesting area.
Yes. So, unconscious bias is certainly something that is part of everyone's existence. So you have these, snap judgments or first impressions of people without having any other information. And, there's a sense of having your in-group, where you don't necessarily branch out to learn and understand other cultures and experiences. And it's very easy to, go about your business and your workday doing the same thing without having an understanding of others. But you do need to understand that even though we all have these unconscious biases, you can do certain things to manage them, work around them, to give yourself the opportunity for new experiences, broader experiences with other groups that are there either at work or throughout your community. So it's important to branch out so that you're not, just functioning within your in-group, whether that be C-suite or, people that look like you or people that have the same hobbies that you do.
Yeah. I also remember when we were talking about that. I remember many years ago, I was approached to join a company. It was when I was still working in the corporate world. And when I went to the offices, it was actually outside of London. And when I went up to the kind of C-suite floor, it had magnificent knee-deep carpets, right? Beautiful furniture, and everything was. And on the rest of the other floors, it was just tiles, right? And I thought, what a differentiator. And you kind of think, do I really want to belong to an organization that actually, because that's the way they behave, right? They probably have their own dining room. But, it's easy to be critical, but the reality is we all have unconscious biases. And, so how do I uncover my own unconscious bias? Because it is unconscious. How do I discover what they are and then do something about it?
So really, John, what you want to do is just take a pause and think about a certain number of questions, such as, is this person triggering something in my background? What are my immediate reactions when I see this person? If you ask yourself questions like that, you'll be able to just take a break from that initial snap judgment and think through, what do I really know about this person? What assumptions am I making about this person versus what I'm really able to see and determine from speaking with them and from interacting with them. So, just taking time to really be conscious of how you might be responding is a good way to mitigate some of that unconscious bias. But unconscious bias starts in the brain. It's a natural response. It's something that's reinforced as, we're children from our parents, our teachers, our peers, and then even later in the media. So it's exposure is the best thing to combat unconscious bias, but you can't overcome it. You can only learn to manage it and be aware of it.
Do you think, are we born with it, or is it, does it kind of grow with us? So is it nature or nurture?
Definitely both. Yeah. So, unconscious bias starts in the amygdala. So it's part of the, emotional learning and preferential development. And it's also in the frontal cortex with regard to memories, with regard to developing impressions, empathy, things like that. So it's part of, our nature. But then again, it's reinforced by the people that we're around and the things that we hear from our parents or our peers, and then reinforced again in the media as we get older. So it's
And
something that's,
the old saying, the first impressions matter. I mean,
yes,
to an extent, that's a version of unconscious bias, isn't it? Because that's the immediate thing that I get. So should I be ignoring my first impressions in a situation, or should I just be saying, well, that's my first impression, it isn't my final one?
That's right. We all have these first impressions that we develop, but you want to ask yourself, what is true here? What do I really know here versus what am I assuming about this person? What am I pulling from other experiences and placing as fact on this person? And then you just want to work through it and have that interaction and, try to think about being fair across the board, which is not always the easiest thing. You have to be aware of it. But the awareness is the most important thing. And that's the main thing that helps us manage it.
I suppose it's going back to the principle that if I want change to happen, I've got to start with me, isn't it? And that's where it does start. I want to come on to the program that you're running with Walk West, through Walk West. But before I get to that, when you're talking to CEOs and leaders, what's your message to the CEOs and leaders to actually get them to really embrace this?
So the focus is really on the business case for diversity and inclusion. How does it benefit your business? And I go through, again, with regard to the revenue benefits, the benefits with regard to retention and recruiting, the benefits in innovation, the benefits of culture. It's very expensive to have to continue to recruit new employees because your employees are not comfortable and don't feel like they can be themselves and their full selves and thrive in that environment. So, it costs a lot of money to have to continue to recruit and replace great employees because of things that you may not be seeing. And a study showed that 13% of employees who leave their jobs leave in part because of not feeling part of the team, not feeling included. And so if you think about 13% of the folks that you turn over in a year, that's quite a lot.
That's a big bill. And, you're talking about really embedding it into the culture. And I think the other thing that I always kind of go back to what the great Peter Drucker said is, that culture eats strategy every day. Because if you have a brilliant strategy, but you have a rotten culture, not a lot is going to happen.
That's right.
And certainly no change is going to happen. Can I just move on to the course that Walk West and that you're kind of rolling out to companies, and what's involved in that, and what are the kind of the key areas that you're touching on?
Yes, so we're building an online self-guided course called Diversity Beyond the Checkbox. And one of the benefits of this course is that it goes beyond just compliance. It goes beyond the social good piece, which are both important pieces of a diversity and inclusion program. But it really hits on the business case for diversity. So there are several modules which include talking about what diversity is and the different types of diversity. It talks about the business case for diversity And it gives a lot of information on how exactly a diversity and inclusion program that works well can benefit your company. It also talks about unconscious bias, which is very important to understand in the workplace. It'll also tell you how to roll out a program and include some lists and check boxes to where you can go through and implement a program in your own organization. And then it also talks about marketing to a diverse world. As society changes, you've got to change with it. And the way that you communicate and the way that you sell to them and market to them changes. So
they're very comprehensive, and it's all online, isn't that correct?
yes, that's correct.
Okay, so where can they get in touch with you to actually find out more details? I mean, we'll put it in the show notes, but where can people reach out to you if they want to get in touch with you to find out more?
Absolutely. So they can go to the diversitymovement.com, and on that site, they'll be able to learn more about the course, be able to sign up for the course. Still in production, so we're still creating those last modules, but it'll be ready soon enough. April 1st is when we plan to roll out the first 3 modules, and then the other 2 will be not far behind. And they can certainly reach out to me there and learn a little bit more about the benefits of diversity and more about the course.
Okay, that would be fantastic. And we'll put all of that information in the show notes so that people can get in touch with you and find out more. Before we wrap up, something I ask everybody: a book that you have read or are reading that's had a significant impact upon you. What is it, and why has it had such an impact?
So I've just finished the book by Erin Meyer called The Culture Map, and it talks about, with diversity and inclusion, how different societies function in business, how they communicate differently. And I'm actually taking a certification for that from North Carolina State University. So that's kind of the new part that I'm getting into after understanding and being able to be proficient in diversity and inclusion itself, but understanding cultures better is where I'm headed next. And so that's a book that I really enjoyed reading, and I'm now taking the certification for that.
All right, that's a new one for my book list. I haven't come across that one before. The other thing that I know from talking to successful people like you is that they all tend to have daily rituals. They can all be different, but I'm always curious as to what individuals' habits are. What are yours?
Well, in the morning, I try to take a few minutes and just be mindful of my blessings and the day and do a little meditation. And in the evening, after I work, I try to make dinner. I enjoy cooking, and it gives me an opportunity to wind down from the day and spend time with my family. And those are the 2 things that I make sure that I try to do most days.
Oh, that's great. The bookends the day. So it's great.
That's right.
Jackie, listen, thank you so much for coming. It's been a real pleasure to have you here. It's a fascinating subject. I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to come back and do it more. But for the moment, thank you so much indeed for being on the Winning Teams podcast.
John, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.